Thank you for joining us and welcome to another edition of Answers Network. I'm your host, Alan Cardoza, and if this is your first time watching or listening to the show, know that every Monday from 11 a.m. to noon Pacific time, this show will bring on special guests that can inspire, educate, and in some cases entertain, while bringing answers and options to making our lives happier, healthier, and more successful. Now, if you can't listen live, all of our shows, including this one, can be found at answers.network. And I'd really appreciate it if you could all do me a wonderful favor. Please forward one of our shows to your social media group and to someone you know who can benefit from a particular subject. This is plenty. This is plenty. Yeah, this is a powerful way to be able to get information out that is positive and that will make people's day. Because we know that there's plenty of negative, slanted, and divisive information out there. But sharing my shows and others like it that focus on improved health, happiness, and success is one powerful way that we can make a positive influence in the world together. Something our guest today is already doing. So let me ask you a question. Are you feeling stuck and unable to reach your goals? Do the same problems keep showing up in your professional and or emotional life, no matter what you do to try to change things? Well, our guest today, Anuradha Dayal-Gulati, believes that by exploring the principles that govern your family energy field and the ways this ancestral field can support you, or it can hold you captive. So know that it can make changes for the positive. And in her book, Your Ancestral Roots, Anna provides exercises and tools to help us recognize and release family patterns and heal ancestral trauma. Anu is a certified energy practitioner specializing in ancestral and emotional healing. She earned her PhD in economics, and after 15 years in finance and academia, shifted to help people create the life they want. Her training in ancestral healing work helps people release the past and reclaim their power for the present and the future. Anu, welcome to Answers Network.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's my pleasure to be here today.
Well, I have certainly enjoyed learning about you, learning about your journey, reading your book, and even watching some of your videos. I felt that I was gaining new information at each turn. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Now, like many in the healing profession, you found yourself dealing with your own health problems. Can you share your story that prompted your career change to energy practitioner and transformational coach, which we know is a huge change from working in finance?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And I think, like most people, like you said, there's something that happens that sweeps you off the path you're on. And often it begins with a health crisis. And I think in some ways, while my story at that time felt so unique to me, I probably was no different from many others who had sort of gone the same way. And I found I had a health problem and I had to go into the ER. And, with the sort of arrogance of youth, I thought, I'm going to put this behind me, come out, get back to life as usual. I can pick myself up. I can do this. But then one night out of nowhere, I had to go back into the ER. And that's the time when I started to feel a little shaken. Like, I'm not sure what's going on. I don't know what's happening. And it's when I had to go back in the third time, after I'd come out the second time, when I had to go back in the third time, I started to feel frightened. I was like, what's going on? I don't really know what's happening. And when I looked at the doctors, I could tell that they didn't really know what was going on. And that's when I started to feel like the sense of powerless sort of sweep over me. Um, but I had a really dear friend, and she's the one who came to see me in the ER. And that's what really shifted things for me, because she looked at me and she said, how many times are you going to go through this? What is it going to
Mhm.
take for you to change? And those words still ring in my ears. What is it going to take for you to change? It's a question I still ask myself. But at that time, I realized I had to do something differently. I had to do something to change the trajectory of my life. And she was into alternative healing, which
Mhm.
is what I had really resisted. But I literally willed myself out of the ER, and I began to explore alternative methods of healing. And that's when I discovered this amazing Chinese medicine doctor who really saved my health. And I discovered flower essences, which is what led me on a whole new path of healing and sort of brought me to where I am today.
Now, your book talks a lot about transgenerational patterns. Share with us what they are and why they're so important uh, for us to heal our lives today.
So when we think of transgenerational patterns, it might be helpful to think of, who our ancestors are. We never really think of them. And if we think of them, it's often like our parents or our grandparents. But in a lot of traditions, especially like Eastern traditions and even the Native American traditions, our ancestors are not just our parents and grandparents. It's those who came up to 7 generations before us. And if they leave something that is unresolved or is something that they want to make amends for, as their descendants, as their living beings on earth, we take on a piece of what is unresolved and we take it on ourselves to heal it. And how it shows up in our life, what's calling for us to heal, is it shows up in these repetitive patterns, whether they are patterns in our relationships, the same kind of toxic bosses at work or co-workers who take credit for the work we do, or the same kind of, intimate relationships we get involved in. There's a pattern that sort of starts to permeate our life. And if we look back, we might even find these patterns repeating across generations. And that's when we know that that is what is calling us to step forward and to heal something and release ourselves from that pattern. Because when we heal, we shift the energy of those who came before us. And because we're the ancestors for those who are going to come up after us, up to 7 generations after, we change the trajectory of those who come after us. So, in some ways, we are more powerful than we ever think. We have the power to create change.
Well, can you give some examples? And I know that as I was reading the book and I was thinking about looking back in my own family tree, and I know that on my father's side, they came over as immigrants, to a small fishing village, uh, and dealt with quite a bit of prejudice and things like that. On my mother's side, I know it goes back to the President Harrison. Uh, but how do we know what's affecting us? What isn't? What's resolved? What isn't resolved?
In many families, we inherit like good things, or whether
Mhm.
it's our sense of humor, whether it's the way we process information, if we're scientific, artistic, if we're good with our hands. We sort of inherit these gifts and we don't really think about them so much. We sort of almost take them for granted. But it's the challenges we are dealing with that's
Mhm.
what's calling to us for healing. And you talked about an example, and one of the simplest examples is a woman who came to me, and she was really wanting to have a better relationship with her daughter. And her daughter had graduated, moved to the West Coast, didn't want to have anything to do with her mother, just the
Mhm.
bare minimum. And this was really upsetting her.
Sure.
And as we explored it, we discovered that she did not have a good relationship with her mother. She wasn't even on talking terms with her mother. So, this is a pattern that is repeating across generations. In my case, when I started to see a pattern in my own life, I saw that my mother, my sister, and I, we all three were living in three different cities, which we did not grow up in, did not go to school in. And we really felt like we didn't belong there. We were not part of the dominant culture. This is not where we, sort of felt a connection. And it struck me like, why am I in this situation? And I realized my grandmother had experienced the same thing too. So there is a pattern, and the pattern has a message. And it's in like hearing and releasing the story that we're carrying that we start to find the freedom to create the lives we want and create possibility.
And when you mentioned unfinished business, one of the things that I thought of was, you are now making a positive difference in people's lives, in a way that most people wouldn't normally look at. Is there something in your past? Is there, a great great grandparent or whatever that was a healer that felt like they didn't do enough, or that they needed to pass on more, but it didn't, in other words, when I think of unfinished business, I'm thinking back and wondering, is that something that you found within your own family tree, and you're now completing something that they started?
Yeah, Alan, that's I think that is really true for anyone who starts the healing path. And what you find that you really end up healing is so unexpected, because in my case, I was saying none of us felt we really belonged where we lived. And of course, I live in the US, I came from India. Um, what I really learned when I started to heal and go back into my understanding my ancestral story is home is not where you live, home is where you belong.
Hmm.
And I feel the transgenerational pattern that I really healed was coming home to myself. Because as long as I was home in myself, I could be present to wherever I was. And I feel what I really want people to do and learn is how to come home to themselves, how to restore that connection to themselves. And that's really what my focus is, because a large part of that is also understanding that when you come home to yourself, you can reclaim your power and you live with hope. One of the biggest things that I realized when I came out of the ER was how important hope is in our life, because I had really lost hope at that time, and it made me realize how important hope is. And so that's what I feel I end up doing, is like I want people to have hope, to believe in themselves, to reclaim their power and find that inner confidence that was somewhere lost.
I love focusing on the positive side of this. I love talking about reclaiming our power, about completing things that our ancestors may have wanted to start and didn't live long enough to finish. But there's another side of this, and I think that's the negative side of it, and it's breaking patterns. And I think that's equally important. If you have somebody who comes from a a family that promoted racism, or that there was something that was very negative in the way in which they lived. Let's talk about breaking those cycles, because I think that's something that's very, very important as well.
Yes, and I think what happens is, we're conditioned by the society we live in and by the time we live in. So, for a family that's living conditioned by racism or conditioned by the importance of, certain things like money or whatever it might be, it's a
Mhm.
conditioning.
Yeah.
And the journey of life is releasing conditioning and arriving at compassion for humanity. And compassion for humanity and for other people's stories doesn't really know any bounds of gender or race or anything else. Um, and I feel sometimes it's so easy to become bitter, but you don't want that to happen. It happens automatically. But once you start working with your ancestral energy field, once you start working with the energy of your own story or what you're struggling with, you start to have compassion for yourself and for others. And then that conditioning slowly lifts because, conditioning is the rules of society and they are always in flux. What we know today, racism is not right, but there was a time when it seemed right. So the
Mhm.
rules of society, can be changing, but the laws of the universe are sort of unchanging and immutable. And as we shift from conditioning, we shift from living by rules to living by sort of universal laws. And I think that's, when a blossoming of your life happens, you see in it a lot of grace, a lot of magic, and people come into your life and you're excited.
So what I hear you saying is that it isn't something that you can completely do within yourself. That it takes help. It takes a team. It takes influences that you're going to make the right choices to take in those ones that are going to be beneficial, and maybe the wisdom to push aside those that we know that aren't working for us.
Yes, and I think, Alan, it's I feel that everything is talking to us all the time, all the time. Your ancestors are speaking to you all the time through patterns asking to be released, through incidents that are coming to your attention. It's kind of the law of karma in play, which
Mhm.
is which is forcing you to shift your conditioning, because if you don't shift your conditioning, you keep coming up against that resistance to something you're trying to accomplish. But you start to live by honoring your ancestors. That's one way in which you're resourcing yourself. And if the law of karma is always in play, there's always grace in play, which we see as synchronicity. And
Mhm.
so you can start to access that as a resource, feel yourself being supported. And then, I use the flower essences because they allow us to make the journey from the head to the heart and that opening of the heart. So, in some ways, you're using the energy of Mother Nature to access and open up your heart. And as you start to do that, you restore a connection to yourself. And when you do that, you connect with other people without expectation, without wanting so much from them. And maybe it might help if I sort of share a story of this woman. Would it help if I sort of
It,
share the
well,
story?
well, absolutely, it would help share the story. But the other part that I'm smiling about is that right before you mentioned flower essences, um, I started to visualize or picture the point in your book where I read about flower essences, and I was about to say, I was going to say, well, this sounds like where you mentioned flower essences. Share with us a little bit more about what they are, and but yet you went there, and I only thought it. Um, so I thought that was very interesting. And then as you kept going, and I thought, what would be great right here is an example, and then you went right into that as well. So that's why I was smiling for anybody that's watching this rather than listening.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do, Alan. Let me share a story and also share how she made a shift with using flower essences. So this woman came, really lovely woman, and she recognized that she was dealing with patterns in her life because her son came to her and he said that he had quit his job And she was really upset, and she realized that she was the primary breadwinner in her family. Her two daughters were the primary breadwinners in their family. And as we started to explore this, it went back to her maternal grandmother as well as her own mother. So she was really upset when she noticed that her son was sort of doing this. And it's not that women can't be breadwinners, but the feeling was that the men were not carrying their weight in the relationship. And as we started to work, we started to explore, like, what are the emotions coming up? And she had a lot of rage, a lot of shame, a lot of resentment against her father, against her sons-in-law, against her grandfather. So there were all these feelings that she was carrying. And of course, she wanted to fix her son. She wanted to control him. He needed to do the right thing. But, none of that was actually helping. And so by acknowledging those emotions and starting to shift them with the help of the flower essences, she also began a practice of honoring her ancestors, of recognizing, the stories she was carrying. Whose stories were they? How did she get them? She started to be able to let go of all of this baggage, all of this strong emotions she was carrying. And as she got into a more peaceful place, her son called her one day and he said, "Mom, I just wanted to let you know I've gone back to work." And then he said, "I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what came over me, but it's not going to happen again." And, she was really thrilled that he had gone back to work. And of course, as the person who's listening to her story, I'm thrilled too. But the fact that he said, "I don't know what came over me, and this is not going to happen again," those were the indicators that the family energy field had shifted, the pattern had shifted.
Yep.
And she was able to accomplish this with the help of the flower essences, letting go of the resentment, letting go of the shame. And so maybe I can use that to share what the flower essences are. And they really, you can think of them as medicine from Mother Nature, because for many thousands of years, dew was considered really sacred. The ancient Egyptians, the Celtics in India, dew was considered sacred. But it's really hard to collect enough dew. And so in the 1930s, there was a British surgeon, Dr. Bach, and he found a way to recreate the healing energy of dew. And the way he did it was by collecting flowers that were right at that peak. This was the day that they were going to be in full bloom, and he would pick them up before sunrise and put them in a bowl of water, so that the energy of the flower, that energy then became imprinted in the water. It released its energy in the water. So he preserved the water with brandy. So flower essences are really wildflower infusions in spring water preserved with brandy. So it's the energetic property of the flower. And he identified 38 flowers based on different emotions and the nuances of the emotion. So, so for the client, we gave her crabapple for shame, willow for resentment, holly for the anger, vine for wanting to control her son. So all the different essences combined helped her shift those feelings she was carrying.
I love it. We are speaking with Anuradha Dayal-Gulati. Her book is Heal Your Ancestral Roots. We're going to take a break. If you know somebody out there that could benefit from this, contact them. We'll be back in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Stay with us. You're listening to or watching Answers Network.
Conflict International are experts at uncovering the truth. Our specialist team has decades of experience in providing a range of bespoke investigation and intelligence services to companies and individuals. Whether you need professional screening or background checks of employees, due diligence of potential clients or business partners, asset tracing services, or surveillance, Conflict International has a rapid response team on hand to get you to the heart of the matter. Our key strength is in our global capabilities. We can tap into an extensive network of trusted professional investigators based in most jurisdictions worldwide, enabling us to go almost anywhere a case takes us. Conflict International has decades of experience with a diverse range of skills among our team, developed from backgrounds in military and security intelligence services, as well as practiced lawyers. Visit our website today at conflictinternational.com to find out more about our services. That's conflictinternational.com. Global reach, local knowledge.
And we're back. You're listening to or watching Answers Network, and we are talking about your ancestral roots. So, Anu, in your book, you have exercises for working with energetic influences to heal our ancestral roots. One of them that I read was creating an ancestral altar. Can you explain what this is and how it works?
Yes, Alan. So in a lot of traditions all over the world, there are ways in which the ancestors are honored. Whether it's Korea, Japan, India, Thailand, Tibet, there are times of the year in which the ancestors are altered, usually through, visiting the graves or offering flowers, prayers, food, wine, charity, to sort of uplift the spirits of the ancestors. And in South America too, Alberto Viola was a Cuban American medical anthropologist, and he discovered he said there were all these altars in South America. And in the Western tradition, he said, we think of these as worshiping the ancestors. But he said this wasn't really about worshiping the ancestors. It was kind of like knowing where your ancestors were. Because if you didn't know where they were running amok, ruining your life. So by creating an ancestral altar, it's a way of anchoring the energy of the ancestors. You know where they are, and by honoring them, you allow their souls to evolve so that they're not like acting as a ceiling on your life. And so the idea is you can make an ancestral altar anywhere, but just, a table, a shelf, put anything on it from your ancestry. If you can't find anything from your ancestry, put something from nature. It's enough. But just stop at it and use the 5 elements: candles, which represent fire; incense, which represents air; sound; water, just to pray for your ancestors, for their souls to be in peace and harmony, and lift up to, places of peace and where they can continue their evolution.
And how much of this is similar to the fact that, if I'm praying for someone that I love that's here, I'm still getting the benefit from it, in that sense, because I'm taking myself to a place of peace. Is this part of what this altar is that we're also bringing ourselves to a level of peace and harmony while we are doing this for them, for our ancestors?
Yes, I think we do that, Alan. We come to a place of greater harmony within ourselves because, transgenerational patterns is the energy of unresolved emotions. So the more we can tap into higher frequency emotions, expand our emotional range, the more we can actually shift what we're carrying. And so if we stop at the altar and we start to access feelings of peace and harmony and gratitude, then we're not holding so tightly onto the resentments and anger that we're carrying. So we start to shift. And that helps us. That helps the world too.
Well, you got that right. We could certainly use more of that right now. One of the things that I thought was very interesting in your book is you promised to kind of give a glimpse into the invisible world. Share a little bit about what you mean by that and give us a glimpse.
Yes, so I think a lot of what we deal with is invisible, like our emotions, right?
Mhm.
We are always taught to sort of ignore them, right? We hear, we're kind of rational beings. We've been told that for a long time, who happen to have emotions which are inconvenient, messy. But if we flip it and, we really are emotional beings and we rationalize our emotions, we can start to see our emotions as something that is really valuable, telling us something about ourselves.
Mhm.
We
Sure.
can start to see ancestral patterns, which is our ancestors trying to communicate with us and have us heal what is unresolved. If we start to, think about how are we supported, how do we resource ourselves, then thinking about the spiritual world, which supports us, or the energy of the earth, those are all in some sense invisible, but they have the power to really heal us and restore us to our, whole selves, to a sense of reclaiming our power.
Mhm. What would you say were the biggest shifts that have come into your life?
I thought, Alan, that once I had sort of done the work, I thought, oh my God, my life is going to be amazing and not everything is going to be smooth. I think this is an illusion that we think life is going to be smooth. It's sort of something we are so inculcated into believing because of maybe television commercials for like beer or food or something. But I think one, patterns keep revealing themselves to be released. So that's one thing I noticed. I noticed that my life didn't become challenge free. The challenges were still there, pushing me to grow. But what I did notice is that my capacity to hold a challenge really increased. And my capacity not to lose my center when I was challenged, that also increased. So it was, I just became stronger. I became much more, I feel kinder, patient. I started to feel a lot more peace, a lot more gratitude. My life felt a lot more in harmony. My relationship certainly deepened, became so much better. And so a lot of those shifts came. And I just find that, I just end up going deeper and deeper each time. That's where I find I'm going.
Now, along those lines, would you say for you or for some of the people that you've worked with, does it also help you to pick and choose which challenges you're even going to address?
I think it's about seeing the challenge that comes up, Alan, because it's like when you peel an onion, the emotions are like onions. So you peel the outermost, the easier ones, and then you
Mhm.
build the strength to go in deeper and deeper. And that's what I notice happens. People might come with, say, an issue at work and recognize, oh, this is an issue I dealt with my father, or this is how it is with my mother. And then the capacity to deal with those relationships starts to increase. And then there's a willingness to say, you know what, I'm going to repair that. I'm going to let that go. I'm going to heal it. I'm going to shift it. And so the strength comes to go deeper and deeper into the onion.
So, and when you say that, what I'm envisioning is that it isn't so much that you're expecting a change in that other person, but more how you're going to deal with it. Does that sound about right?
Yes, absolutely. Like the client I was talking about who wanted to fix her son,
Yeah.
shifting herself, like shifted her son. I mean,
Right.
she had a deeper appreciation of her sons in law, her father, her grandfather. Like all of that shifted. They didn't have to do anything. She shifted.
And what about if we're now talking, we're still talking from generational, but with the living ancestors, the ones that are still living, where people have seen something that's been passed down by a grandpa to a father when we're now in the third or fourth generation. Again, when you're going to make shifts and changes in yourself, but what are some of the things that you can do going back up that chain? Or do you try to just skip part of it and go as far back as you can? How would you address something like that, where you have a family member that wants to make a change, but they're looking at their parent, their grandparent, or their great grandparent, and they know that there's some things they don't want to pass on to the next generation? What are some suggestions as to how they can do that without really damaging the relationship with those others that are a few generations further along?
So I just want to make sure that I understood your question, Alan. So
Okay.
let's say you have like a son, and
Mhm.
he has you're saying he has a living father or grandfather,
Right.
and doesn't want to repeat the pattern. Now, would he be having a good relationship with them, with either of them or both of them, or not? Because oftentimes the repetition of a negative pattern is the way of the energy field trying to force us to respect that what we are disrespecting. And a lot of religious traditions will say respect your parents,
Right.
and they're not actually saying love your parents, but they're saying respect your parents, which means really respect the story that they're struggling with or they're trying to overcome, or have compassion for their story if you can, or accept them. Don't try to fix them. I think a lot of times, as the descendants, we sometimes feel like I got to fix them. We cannot fix them. What we can do is just simply accept them. Like, this is who they are. For whatever reason, they became this way. They couldn't shift the pattern. And that acceptance, that respect, that compassion allows us to sort of start to not hold that pattern so tightly.
Mhm.
Because when we disrespect them, the pattern gets tight.
Right.
And so then there's that loosening, and there's an ability to shed it, to shift it. Compassion has like a more enormous capacity to do that.
Okay.
I wonder if that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And again, so in fact, I have so many questions that I put together because as I was going through the book, it created more questions. But I also try to look at this from the standpoint of the viewers and the listeners, is that, how can we give them the most information? Another thing that you have in the book, you talk about the framework and you use the acronym of HOME, HOME. Can you share with our viewers and listeners what this is and how it works?
Yes, and so HOME is the acronym, about restoring connection to yourself. So by honoring your ancestors, by creating an altar for them, by stopping at it, with gratitude and asking, for support for the challenges that you're dealing with, is a way of honoring them, kind of accepting them as they are. And then that allows us to settle within us with a kind of coherence, that this is what I came from. We can't cut our roots and expect to thrive. The O, so that's the H for honoring your ancestors. O is to observe your emotions, to recognize that even your negative emotion is telling you, here's where I disconnected from myself. I'm jealous, but this is because, I can't have what somebody has and I really want it. And so recognizing that maybe there's sadness, there's fear, there's shame, like being kind to ourselves.
Right.
That's the part of the O. And M is to recognize that even if there is a law of karma in play, grace is appearing in very sort of subtle ways, and opening our eyes to grace allows us to see how we're being cared for. So that M is to magnify your spiritual connection by just seeing and observing what's going on. And E is to engage with Mother Earth, the mother of all mothers, the mother of all fathers. Our remains never leave the earth. And in many traditions, it's called grounding. Just connecting with the energy of the earth sort of nourishes us. It heals us because we live here. We live on this earth. And again, it's cutting our home off from ourselves when we disconnect with the energy of Mother Earth. And in those ways, we start to establish that pathway back to ourselves and back to our connection with ourselves. And then we don't expect so much from others. We can be with them as they are, and we can protect our boundaries. We don't have to lose ourselves.
Well, I love that you brought up grounding, and it's so interesting that that's one of the things that I chose to do. My birthday was yesterday, and I chose to go with the love of my life, and we spent about an hour and a half grounding. And it made for it helped make the rest of the day a beautiful day. So again, for everybody out there, there's certainly benefits.
Oh, happy birthday, Alan. And that sounds a beautiful way to spend your birthday. Wow.
Thank you.
Lovely and inspiring.
Yes. Well, and again, time has flown by. So I have loved this time that we've been able to spend together. What's the one thing that you want readers to take away after they read the book?
I really want them to understand. I want every reader to understand that restoring the connection to yourself is the most important thing you can do. And as you restore that connection to yourself, your life will shift. It'll become much happier, much better. And anyone can do that. It doesn't cost much. And even if you just buy a blank journal and journal every day, that will start the process of reconnecting with yourself. Or as you said, grounding, just being in Mother Nature. Easiest, cheapest, simplest. But it'll start the journey back to yourself. And
that's great.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Well, and again, it is my pleasure. I wish that we had more time. I know that the book is put out by Simon & Schuster. I assume you can get it anywhere books are sold. For anybody out there, if your neighborhood book doesn't have it, I'll bet they can order it. If not, then there's Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and so many others. Is there anything I'm leaving out?
No, it's available wherever books are sold, including the indie bookstores can get it for you. So, yeah, thank you for that.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for making a positive difference in the world for all of us. And again, for everybody out there, having myself gone through the book myself, highly recommend it. Go out, get a copy. And I'd love your comments, as I'm sure that Anu would be. So Anu, if somebody wants to make comments, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
They can reach me through my website, healyorancestralroots.com. I receive emails from that regularly. So
okay. And if you're out there and you're driving and you can't write that down, I'll make sure that we have that in our show notes so that you know how to do that. So again, Anu, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Now, for everybody out there, please visit our archives of past interviews at answers.network. Or better yet, just subscribe to our show. You can do it through Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube if you want to see it rather than hear it. You have Rumble, Spreaker, and so many other popular podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please leave a review. I want you to know that it will help us reach more people, and we greatly appreciate it. Next time you're on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, remember, stop by our page, check out some of our latest shows, and if you like them, please like us and spread the word. For everybody out there, be good human beings, and be with us again next week on Answers Network.
You're listening to Answers Network with Alan Cardoza, only on LA Talk Radio.